Hey, welcome to another episode of Consumer Protection and You with Ryan Lippe. Ryan Lippe is a consumer educator with the State of Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost office. And today he's going to be talking with the head of the economic crimes in the consumer protection section. So stay tuned. Welcome to another episode of Consumer Protection and You with Ryan Lippe. Ryan Lippe is a consumer educator with the State of Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost office. Ryan, it's always a pleasure talking with you.
Great. Nice to be with you again, Patrick. I appreciate the opportunity.
And I understand that you have a great guest that's going to give the viewing audience a lot of great information.
Absolutely. I've talked before about some of the specialized areas of the consumer protection section. Again, we're just one of 33 sections in the Ohio Attorney General's office, but one that's public facing. We do a lot of public services. We do a lot of hard work on behalf of Ohioans. We have our robocall enforcement unit. We have our elder justice unit. And we've got our economic crimes unit, which is headed up by Bart Cosgrove. So I wanted to introduce Bart. Welcome to the program. And some of you may have caught some of our other guests in the past from our other specialized units, but Bart is the latest one to take camera. So thank you so much, Bart, for being here this morning.
Well, thanks for having me, Ryan and Patrick. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Great. Well, do you want to talk a little bit about your background and how that fits so well with the mission of protecting the unprotected and what we do at the Ohio Attorney General's office?
Sure. So prior to joining the Ohio Attorney General's office, I was an assistant Hamilton County prosecutor and did that for a number of years and was dealing with all types of crimes, whether it was quality of life crimes or economic crimes. And when the opportunity came along to join this new unit, which was beginning back in 2011 with the Ohio Attorney General's office, it was a tremendous opportunity. And I'm glad it was afforded to me. And it's a great place to work. And the type of work we do is very fulfilling.
Great. And I know you also wear several hats at the Attorney General's office. You also happen to be the managing attorney for the Cincinnati area office. There are several offices in the state of Ohio. Most of our staff works in Columbus. Are there any special challenges or impacts that you make by being in the Queen City that maybe we don't get to experience being in Columbus? Because I know so much of our staff is in Columbus. Sometimes these remote locations have some special advantages. I know that you guys do a lot of work in Hamilton County and the surrounding counties on behalf of Ohioans.
No, you're right, Ryan. I think one of the advantages that the regional locations provide to the office overall is that we do provide our own type of outreach here. We have our own types of connections in courthouses and prosecutors' offices and in sheriff's departments. And many times we're actually the face of the office for the contacts from consumers or others. So I think it's an advantage. We provide another service to the office that we are the boots on the ground locally. And I think overall it's a benefit. I think the nice thing that I get to see is I get to interact with other sections in our office that I probably wouldn't if I were located in the Columbus office. I off the top of my head, the Cincinnati regional office, we have about 29 employees, and those employees represent about 13 of the sections that, as you just pointed out, we have over 30 sections in the office. So from time to time, I do get exposed to the other great work our office does that I probably wouldn't have seen otherwise. So from that standpoint, I enjoy that.
Great. Well, let's step back and take a look at the work of the Economic Crimes Unit. Can you describe the reason for the unit, the mission for the unit? I've talked in the past, for instance, about how so many of our laws in the state of Ohio that apply to consumers are civil in nature, not criminal. But obviously, the ECU does a lot of work to put people in jail. I mean, frankly, there are some scammers that deserve jail time, not just a financial penalty. Can you go ahead and talk, maybe step back a little bit and tell our audience about ECU, the background of why it exists and what kind of cases it handles?
Sure. So the Economic Crimes Unit was formed in February of 2011. And the overall justification for the unit coming into existence was the office receives thousands of consumer complaints a year, as you know. Sometimes it may be as upward as like 25,000. And the people that were seeing these, it started to notice that a certain percentage of these complaints were just flat out crimes, where people were providing money to suppliers or contractors and were getting absolutely nothing in return. And it wasn't even close where a business was trying to make a good faith effort or a breakdown communication. It was just basic criminal activity. And unfortunately, when you're dealing with someone whose mindset is, I'm going to steal, I'm going to victimize somebody, a lawsuit is not going to stop them, because many times they are nomadic. They don't have a fixed address. They're not going to respond to your lawsuit. They're not going to come in with clean hands and try to, in good faith, negotiate something. They're just out there to take advantage of someone. So the idea was, hey, let's get some former prosecutors, some folks who have a criminal background, to come in and give these complaints a second view. And we were able to build the unit out by bringing in some investigators that exclusively work on these. And here's the real point of what we're trying to do. We're trying to put together criminal cases that have a consumer genesis to them and present them to the local prosecutor's office to see if that case can then be indicted. And it's important to note that Ohio is a home rule state. We have 88 counties. We have 88 prosecutors. And it's the prosecutor has the exclusive authority on what comes into the grand jury and what can be prosecuted. So when you hear that the Economic Crimes Unit is prosecuting something in a county, what that means is that we investigated a case and we brought it to that county prosecutor's office and asked to be appointed as a special prosecutor. And then we work through that capacity, and that gives us all the privileges of going into a grand jury, going to court dates, negotiating how the cases ultimately will be resolved. And that's kind of the model that we followed over the last 10 years. And it seems to work well, particularly with the types of cases that we are pursuing. We have the ability and the resources to put time into some of these cases that some agencies may not have the luxury of time or a budget or personnel to do. And I think that's kind of the niche that we fill.
Well, and I think consumers would be impressed to know that, those are times when we all need to come together and go after a culprit or a defendant. I mean, these are cases that are jointly worked by the Economic Crimes Unit from the Attorney General's office alongside county prosecutors, local county sheriff's departments, city police departments. It's sort of an all hands on deck effort from the local and state level to really get this case off the ground and do the investigations and do the prosecutions that's necessary. But I think another important part is that consumers usually, if the case goes as planned, do get their money back, essentially, for what they've been scammed. If all goes well, isn't restitution usually part of the case that's brought before the courts?
No, you're right, Ryan. I mean, I would say, when we talk to victims in our cases, it's quite often that they'll say, hey, look, all I really want is my money back so I can get this job done. So restitution is always something we ask for if we obtain a conviction. Now, whether the defendant's in a position to make restitution after they've been convicted, that's a different story. But I will tell you, and I don't know if this is just we've had a string of good luck or exactly what to account this for, but if you go to any county prosecutor's office in the state and you kind of ask them about what do you see as a common theme with your theft cases, it's probably going to be someone will come in, they'll plead guilty, we'll have them on probation for a period of time to pay the restitution, but unfortunately it's only a very small percentage of the amount that it was originally stolen. With a couple of our cases, and I know there was a case in particular we did probably 5 or 6 years ago where we probably had about 25 victims, and the total loss, if you add it all up, was approximately $150,000. And that defendant paid 100% restitution. I know we had another case that I was involved with down here in Hamilton County probably about 8 years ago where a contractor stole about $45,000 from a number of people, and he too made 100% restitution. Now, that is not the norm, but we do seem to have had some good success with actually getting real money back to people, and it never surprises me. People are absolutely flabbergasted. They're like, I can't believe I got anything back, because unfortunately, that's probably the right mindset to have when you've been victimized by like that. These are not people that are saving their money in the event that they get caught to pay somebody back. I think that may be one of the things when someone gets indicted after they've, gone through that type of conduct. I think it refocuses them as far as what they can do to make someone whole again.
Yeah, and I mean, just looking at some of what the Economic Crimes Unit has done, I mean, in 2020 alone, they opened over 450 criminal investigative matters. And again, in cooperation, and this is important, in cooperation with local law enforcement, with county prosecutors, the unit filed a handful of indictments and obtained 12 convictions. So, was that pretty much a normal year, or were things impacted a bit by Corona and the pandemic and price gouging and all these other issues involved? Because I know that we took about 24,000 complaints in the office throughout the year. And our number 2 complaint category was pandemic matters, coronavirus matters. And so that really impacted a lot of what they did, at least on the civil side and on the dispute resolution side of the office. But what was it? Was it an unusual year in terms of dealing with the pandemic and prosecutions that may have involved that type of issue?
Well, yeah, there was nothing normal about last year. It impacted a lot of what we did. And to go back to a previous point that we had just made, we work in cooperation with police departments and prosecutors' office and sheriff's departments. And it may seem like a lifetime ago, but if you go back to last March and last April, what you saw with law enforcement was they had to really refocus and prioritize how they were going to have their personnel going out and interfacing with the public, because everyone's health was a concern. And if you're a first responder, you cannot work from home. You go to work, you have to. And what that did in some parts of the state was, law enforcement may not be able to help us out on doing an interview, a suspect interview, because they didn't want people coming in if it wasn't absolutely necessary. And some of the crimes that we're looking at are not life and death situations at all. So it was something that you could kind of put off for a little while because they just didn't have the ability to do it. There's no doubt the pandemic also had an impact on, I think, people's ability to victimize others through electronics and the internet, because that's where everyone was at home with your computer. If a suspect or a bad entity had the ability to infiltrate your computer or your bank accounts, I mean, that's where the focus went. But it did have an impact on us. We limited where our personnel were going until we really had a sense of how to best, what our best practices were when we go out in the field and how we were going to deal with other agencies and matters of the public. And our office was very great with that. I mean, first and foremost, the health and safety of the employees and the people the public that we deal with was always number one. So it was not a usual year by any stretch of the imagination. And here's the other thing that's completely outside of our control. A number of courthouses throughout the state just flat out closed for some period of time. And then they very slowly reopened and handled the criminal cases that had time limitation issues that absolutely had to be handled. And then you also had prosecutors' offices didn't convene grand juries for a period of time. That happened on a local county level, and that also happened on the federal level to a certain extent. So you had a number of cases that would be ready to be presented to a grand jury, but then couldn't because everyone had to figure out how to make people safe. And if you've ever been in front of a grand jury or in some of these courthouses, I mean, you got 9 to 12 people sitting in close proximity to each other in a small room, and that wasn't a really good situation for people to be in last spring or even last summer. The law enforcement component was just as impacted as any business component that you see about what the pandemic did to resources and personnel. So we did see that loosening up, over the last few months, which is great as more people come out and feel more confident about what we're doing. But it definitely had an impact.
What about, there are so many cases that are handled by the consumer protection section. Does anything recently stick out as far as a great profile of the type of case that the Economic Crimes Unit handles? I know that we've talked before, and we haven't had an opportunity, I don't think, on this show to talk about Patrick Wilson and his indictment on 70 charges of, he basically stole over $400,000 from even 4 elderly homeowners, not just homeowners, but these were older adults as well in some cases in both Ohio and West Virginia counties. But are there some cases that stick out that would give the public watching this program an opportunity to see what kind of cases that the Economic Crimes Unit deals with? Nothing's really run-of-the-mill is the way I see it. I mean, everything is unique. Let's take a look at a couple of those types of cases.
So we probably get maybe between 20 and 25,000 consumer complaints a year.
Yeah.
And whether it's a pandemic or once in a lifetime pandemic or not, contractor fraud cases are always a certain percentage of what we get. You can always, unfortunately, count on those. And that's like Patrick Wilson is an example you brought up that we indicted and are prosecuting in Washington County, I believe. There are probably upwards of 20 victims, a couple $100,000 worth of loss where someone just came into an area that had been hit by some storms and took money and didn't do anything. That case is still pending right now. But that would be one example. Another example would be, and these are truly sad cases on multiple levels, but we see what are sometimes referred to as romance scam cases that come through our office. And what that is, for people that may not be familiar with it, is someone meets somebody online or on a chat room or some other type of social media platform, and they believe they're beginning a friendship or some type of a relationship. And what happens is the suspect on the other end gets the victim to turn over large amounts of money. And unfortunately, these are some of the biggest single losses we see with one victim that can get up to as close as $800,000, where they're liquidating assets, they're liquidating retirement accounts because they believe that they've met someone and they're going to be part of their lives. And the whole thing's a scam. And so it turns their life upside down. So it's upsetting from that standpoint. We have had success with one of those cases in particular. It probably happened about 8 or 9 years ago, where we cooperated and actually brought the case to the attention of the federal authorities, did the investigation, and the suspect was actually indicted by the U.S. Attorney in Maryland. And he was part of a much bigger operation, and the victim in Ohio lost, I think, close to $700,000. But there's an example of a case that, but for our involvement, it may not have popped on the radar screen. we received probably back in the 2012, we got subpoena power for telecommunications fraud. And it may sound boring. You're like, well, why is that? Why is that a big deal? Well, it's important because it allows us to issue our own subpoenas from our office if we believe a telecommunication device has been used to facilitate that fraud. And that's important because almost everyone now has a cell phone in their pocket. Almost every crime that we see has some type of telecommunication component to it. And it saved us a tremendous amount of time, and it allowed us to move forward on so many cases all at the same time, where we're sending subpoenas out to Google, Yahoo, you name it. Because before we had that, we had to go and ask law enforcement or a prosecutor's office, hey, will you submit one of these subpoenas for us and then send it back to us? And it got kind of tedious. They were always very helpful to do it, but it was a real upswing to us that we got that tool, and it's an extraordinarily important tool for us. And telecommunications fraud is almost a charge that you will always see in one of the cases that we bring, and it's a great tool that we've been able to use.
Great. Those are great examples. And I think it's important to note that consumers can find out more about the office and about the Economic Crimes Unit. You can even read some of the press releases that, and you can subscribe to press releases that talk about a lot of these cases at www.ohioprotects.org. That's www.ohioprotects.org. And our toll-free number, our help center, is 800-282-0515. And the importance of that phone number is, and the website is, that's where you can report scams. That's where you can file a complaint against a business, even a legitimate business. I mean, even if you haven't been scammed, if you don't see eye to eye with a business, we can actually put your matter through informal dispute resolution, where we have complaint specialists that are looking at that case and telling your side of the story to the business. I mean, we've got to be fair to the business and fair to the consumer. We don't make any judgments, and we can't issue findings of fact like a judge would in court, but we can certainly, on our letterhead and with our phone system, talk to that business on the behalf of the consumer and see if there's something they can do for a successful resolution of the complaint through our informal dispute resolution process. It's not every case that rises to the level of an economic crimes unit based indictment or a jury trial at a courthouse. I mean, we take a lot of people that have been duped by hundreds, thousands of dollars and try as best we can to prosecute and to get money back if there's any money to get back. Do you have any final thoughts, Bart, in terms of what the ECU does now and what they're projected to do in the future to, again, protect the unprotected? And as Attorney General Dave Yost wants to do, we want, for instance, Ohio to be the toughest state in the nation for robocallers to operate in. Where do you see ECU in the coming months?
Well, I think the robocall component of it is definitely going to be something that will be taking an active role in. I knew when that legislation was getting drafted, they had us in mind for part of it. I think moving forward, there will always be part of why we're here in the first place, which is we do feel, I think, a need that we're able to look at cases that local law enforcement may not have the ability to do, and we bring that those resources to the table. I think, it's without a doubt, everything is happening electronically right now. I think what we're trying to stay at least on pace with is how people are losing money, how people are getting victimized, and how we can work with perhaps other agencies and perhaps even federal agencies with trying to do our part in stopping just a tremendous amount of financial scams that are taking place, whether it's unemployment or whether it's any other type of scam that comes in via email. That's truly where the crime is taking place now. And the more that we can actually identify people here in the state and in the country and try to bring cases, that will be the real mark of what we can do. But that's in my opinion where everything is going right now.
Well, and so many of the consumer scams presentations that I do end up with folks in the audience knowing that we've done something in an area of the law and in an area of the economy where they didn't think anything could be done. They're thinking to themselves, well, who's looking out for me? And every day we're doing hard work at the Attorney General's office to at least do what we can do as a state agency to do that work on behalf of Ohioans, try to get money back where it's possible, but then educate, and that's really my responsibility with the other educators on board in the consumer protection section, is to teach people to spot a scam, to be able to find out when to hang up the phone, how to report a robocall, how to get on the do not call list, and what to do if somebody's violating your consumer rights. So I want to turn it back over to Patrick.
Thank you, Ryan. We hear of major crimes from individuals not in the United States, but from other areas, like the ransomware. Do you find, Bart, that there's a lot of areas in which you're getting involved with when it comes to outside the country?
Yes. And we've actually started seeing that as far back as 5 or 6 years ago, when we had a brief involvement with a company that lost $4 or $5 million overseas. And what's important to note with the type of ransomware cases that you just referenced, a lot of the technical expertise is with federal agencies. They have the training, they have the components to be able to investigate that. And most importantly, they have the jurisdiction to investigate a crime outside the United States. Once you get into that area, you're dealing with different agreements between foreign countries on what you can and cannot do. So we've kind of hit that limit with some. And what we do in those cases is we provide absolutely every piece of information we can to the federal agency that has the lead and can take the case forward at that point in time. But you're 100% correct. So much of the money that we see today that is lost in scams is gone overseas, and it leaves the country almost instantaneously. And sometimes the bad guy never stepped foot in the United States, and that's truly frustrating as far as, trying to get some level of justice and trying to get some type of level of recovery to the victim.
It's interesting. Ryan, I want to thank you very much for bringing Bart on. I've learned a lot when it comes to those crimes, those scams that have a criminal aspect to it.
Absolutely. It's an important part of our office. It all fits together into the consumer protection section. And again, we encourage viewers to get on the website, ohioprotects.org, to find out more about what we're all about. And if you do need help with a complaint against a business, we're just a phone call away through our help center, 800-282-0515. Thank you so much, Bart Cosgrove, Managing Attorney for the Cincinnati office of the Ohio Attorney General's Office and Director of our Economic Crimes Unit within the Consumer Protection Section.